Before I begin, do me a favor. If you enjoy real incident-style horror stories like this one, like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel right now. And when you're done listening, comment below which city and country you're watching from, and what time it is for you. I read every single comment, because what I'm about to tell you happened in the United States, and it can happen anywhere. I never believed a place could recognize you, not see you, not remember you, but recognize you, like a living thing realizing you've crossed some invisible line. I was a ranger assigned to Yellowstone National Park, and I had already survived 3 winters there. You don't last that long unless you learn the rules quickly. Don't wander off marked routes. Don't trust silence. And never assume the radio is just a radio. That last rule, I learned it the hard way. The night everything began, I was alone in the northern sector, an area most visitors never see. Dense timber, volcanic rock beneath the soil, and valleys where sound behaves strangely. Radios crackle, compasses hesitate, and sometimes your own breathing feels like it's coming from somewhere else. I remember checking my gear inside the ranger cabin before heading out. The place smelled like old wood, damp fabric, and burned coffee. My name, not an important one, and not one you've ever heard before, was printed on a plastic tag above the desk. I remember touching it, grounding myself, the way you do before stepping into something you don't quite trust. The assignment was simple on paper. A hiker hadn't checked out at a trailhead before sunset. No emergency beacon. No call for help. Just absence. And in Yellowstone, absence is never nothing. Dispatch said they'd keep the channel open. Standard procedure. I stepped outside, locked the cabin, and the forest swallowed the sound of the door before the latch even settled. That should have been my first warning. The trailhead was quiet. Too quiet. No insects. No wind moving through the trees. Even my boots against the dirt felt muffled, like the ground didn't want to echo me back. I radioed in that I was starting the search. The response came back delayed. Not garbled, just slow, like someone had to think before replying. I shook it off. Radios in this terrain were unreliable. Everyone knew that. I followed the trail until it thinned into something more like a suggestion than a path. The farther I went, the more I felt observed. Not watched from a single direction, but held in place by the forest itself. Then the radio clicked. Not static. A clean, deliberate click. "Ranger," a voice said. I stopped walking. The voice wasn't dispatch. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It sounded calm, measured, almost familiar, but in the way a stranger can feel familiar when they already know too much about you. I answered anyway. Training is hard to silence. "Go ahead." There was a pause, not the kind caused by signal lag, the kind where you can almost hear someone deciding what to say. "You're past the boundary," I frowned. "Say again?" Another pause. "Not the map boundary," the voice said. "The other one." My mouth went dry. I checked my GPS unit. Everything looked normal. Coordinates were where they should be. Trail markers, what few there were, lined up with the terrain. "This is Ranger Unit North," I said, more sharply now. "Identify yourself." The radio stayed silent long enough for me to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. Then it spoke again. "You shouldn't use your call sign out here." A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the cold. "How do you know my call sign?" I asked. No answer. I told myself it was another ranger messing with me. Maybe a tech error cross-feeding channels. Maybe fatigue. The brain does strange things when you spend too many nights alone in places like this. I kept moving. That was my mistake. The forest changed gradually. Trees grew closer together. The ground dipped in ways that didn't match the topographic data on my device. And every so often, I caught the faint impression of movement. Never in front of me. Always just beyond where I'd already looked. The radio clicked again. "You don't hear them yet," the voice said. "That's good." I stopped completely this time. "Hear who?" I demanded. Silence. I remember realizing something then. Something small but deeply wrong. The radio wasn't crackling between transmissions anymore. It was too clear, too present, like a direct line. "Dispatch," I said. "Come in." Nothing. I switched channels. Same result. Then the voice returned. Closer now. Not louder. Closer. They stopped sounding like animals after the first night. My heart started to hammer. I dealt with bears, wolves, injured bison. This was different. This wasn't fear of something physical. This was the sensation of being studied. I told myself to turn back, to abort the search and call for backup. But pride is a dangerous thing in uniform. So is curiosity. I took another step forward, and the radio said my name. Not my call sign. Not Ranger. My actual name. I felt my knees weaken. No one outside official records should have known it. Not out here. "How do you know that?" I whispered. The reply came instantly. "Because you answered." I don't know how long I stood there, staring into the trees. The forest felt closer now, like it had leaned in. The air pressed against my ears, heavy and expectant. Then the voice changed. It wasn't alone anymore. There was a second layer beneath it, something distorted, almost echoing, as if the words were being repeated by a mouth that didn't understand language, only sound. "They know your steps now," the radio said. "They'll try to follow the old way first." "What old way?" I asked, my voice shaking despite every attempt to steady it. "Calling for help." The radio went dead. No click, no static. Dead. I tried every channel, reset the unit, checked the battery. Nothing. That was when I heard it. Not a sound exactly, but a pressure, like something shifting behind my ears. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt crowded. I turned back toward the trailhead and realized the trail was gone. Not overgrown. Not hidden. Gone. In its place was a shallow slope leading into a darker section of trees I didn't recognize. Trees that leaned inward, branches overlapping like clasped fingers. That was the moment I understood something fundamental. The missing hiker wasn't lost. They were taken, and whatever had taken them now knew I was here. I stood there longer than I should have, my light aimed at the place where the path should have been. The beam hit uneven ground, exposed roots, and dark soil that looked freshly disturbed. Not dug, not broken, just rearranged, as if the land had exhaled and settled differently. I told myself, trails vanish all the time. Fog hides them. Snow erases them. Panic exaggerates things. But panic doesn't usually make the sky feel lower. The trees ahead formed a narrow corridor, darker than the rest of the forest. It wasn't a trail, but it was the only direction that made any sense. Behind me, everything looked wrong. Too uniform, too flat, like a poor copy of the forest I'd just walked through. I chose forward. Every step felt negotiated, like the ground decided whether to hold my weight. My breathing sounded foreign to me, slightly delayed, like it had to travel before it reached my ears. That's when I noticed something else. The forest was responding. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, Something shifted. Never visible, never loud, but aware. I tried the radio again. Still dead. I shouted instead. Not the missing hiker's name. I refused to use it. Suddenly afraid of what names did out here. But a general call. A ranger's voice is trained to carry authority, even when fear is chewing at the edges. My words didn't echo. They didn't fade normally either. It felt like the forest absorbed them. I kept moving until the land dipped sharply downward into a shallow ravine. Cold air pooled there, thick and damp. My light caught something pale against the dark ground ahead. Fabric. I approached slowly, every sense screaming at me to stop. The object was a backpack, partially torn, straps frayed as if something had worried at them patiently. Inside were the usual things: snacks, a map, a water bottle, and something that didn't belong. A small notebook, weathered and swollen from moisture. I didn't want to open it. I did anyway. The pages were filled with writing. Tight, frantic lines that grew more uneven the farther I flipped. At first it was normal. Dates, trail notes, observations about wildlife. Then the tone changed. Something answers when I talk. It uses the pauses. I think it learns faster than I do. The last entry was written so hard the pen had torn the paper. If you hear your name, don't respond. It doesn't know you yet. My chest tightened. It knew me. I felt it before I heard it. The sense of pressure returning. That same uncomfortable fullness behind my ears. I straightened slowly, light sweeping the ravine. Nothing. Then the forest exhaled. Not wind, not sound. A coordinated release of tension, like something letting go because it had decided I wasn't leaving. The radio crackled to life in my hand. I nearly dropped it. "See?" the voice said, calm as ever. "You found him." "No," I said hoarsely. "I found his things." A faint distortion layered beneath the voice again, closer now, more confident. "He's still walking," it replied, "just not forward." My stomach twisted. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Everywhere," he answered. The ravine felt deeper now, though I hadn't moved. My light no longer seemed strong enough to define edges. Everything blurred slightly at the periphery, like my vision was being edited. "I'm leaving," I said. I don't know who I was trying to convince. The voice didn't argue. It laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, patiently. "You can," it said, "but you won't do it quietly." The pressure increased. My thoughts began to slide, like they couldn't quite grip one another. I realized with sudden clarity that the forest wasn't confusing me. It was listening for patterns, for habits, for the things I did when I was afraid. I turned and started moving uphill, back the way I thought I'd come. The terrain resisted me. Slopes steeper than they should have been. Roots positioned like obstacles placed deliberately. The radio stayed silent. That scared me more than the voice. Then I heard it. Not a sound, not exactly. A cadence. A rhythm in the way the forest seemed to rearrange behind me. Like something following the memory of my movement rather than my actual position. I broke into a jog. The land rose sharply and leveled out into a clearing I didn't recognize. At its center stood an old structure, what looked like a collapsed ranger outpost, long since abandoned. The roof had caved in, walls warped and blackened by age. I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach drop, that it had not been there before. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming that buildings don't appear overnight in protected land. Inside, the air felt stale, unmoving. My light revealed old equipment, rusted tools, and markings carved into the walls. Not symbols, tallies, hundreds of them, some old, some fresh. I reached out without thinking and touched one. The radio screamed. Not static, not feedback. A chorus of overlapping voices, layered and distorted, all speaking at once. Some begging, some calm, some angry, some resigned. And threaded through them all, my name. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The sound cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence. The original voice returned, closer than ever. "This is where they learn to stop walking," it said. "What are you?" I whispered. A pause. Then, "We're what stays when the map stops helping." My vision tunneled. I realized I was hyperventilating, breath coming too fast, too shallow. The tallies on the wall seemed to stretch when I looked directly at them, lines growing longer, deeper. I forced myself to focus. I had one advantage: training. I turned my radio off completely and clipped it to my belt. Then I stood very still. The forest reacted instantly. The pressure intensified, confused now. The listening sensation wavered, like it had lost a thread. I took a step backward without sound. Nothing responded. Another step, still nothing. Understanding hit me in a rush. It wasn't tracking movement, it was tracking engagement. Voice, sound, response. I moved slowly, carefully, retracing my steps from memory alone. I didn't look at the trees. I didn't think about direction. I focused on my breathing, steady and silent. The old structure faded behind me. The forest shifted uneasily. I felt the attention return, searching. Then the radio clicked on my belt, on its own. "You're learning," the voice said softly. "That's dangerous." I tore the radio free and hurled it as far as I could into the trees. The forest reacted. A sudden, violent shudder ran through the ground, knocking me off balance. Somewhere behind me, something answered the radio. Multiple somethings, overlapping, excited. I ran. I didn't care where. I didn't care how loud I was anymore. I ran until my lungs burned and the world narrowed to motion and fear. And just when I thought I would collapse, I burst through the trees onto open ground. The trailhead. Real. Familiar. Lit faintly by moonlight. I dropped to my knees, shaken, unable to tell if I was laughing or crying. Behind me, the forest stood still. Too still. As if disappointed. I made it back to the cabin before dawn. I locked every door, covered every window. I didn't sleep, because I knew something now. The missing hiker wasn't the first, and I wasn't going to be the last, unless I stopped answering. I used to believe that surviving something meant it was over, that if you made it back to a locked door, a familiar room, a place with walls and names and rules, whatever chased you would stop at the edge like an animal unsure of fire. That belief lasted until the second night. The cabin didn't feel safe anymore. It wasn't dramatic at first. Nothing moved. Nothing sounded wrong. But the space felt noticed, the way you feel when someone has memorized the layout of your home without ever stepping inside. I didn't turn the radio back on. I removed the battery and sealed it in a metal locker. I logged a partial incident report by hand, careful with every word, vague where I could be. Rangers are taught to document facts, but we're also taught when not to. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall, light off, listening to my own breathing until it steadied. Morning came reluctantly, gray and thin. The forest outside looked normal again. Birds returned. Wind moved the branches in believable ways. I almost convinced myself it had been exhaustion. Almost. By midday, headquarters called in a search escalation. Another ranger would join me at dusk. Standard procedure. Relief washed over me, then immediately curdled into dread. I didn't want anyone else answering. I tried to explain without sounding unfit for duty. I chose my words carefully. I said the terrain was unstable. I said there were anomalies with equipment. I suggested delaying until daylight. They agreed to delay the second ranger's arrival until the following evening. I had bought myself one night. That night, the cabin changed. It started with the windows, not movement, orientation. I noticed it when I stood to stretch. The window over the desk didn't line up with the trees the way it should have. The angle felt wrong, like the view had been shifted a few degrees. Subtle enough that I questioned myself. I stepped closer. Outside, the forest was quiet again, too attentive. The trees stood evenly spaced, their trunks forming vertical lines that felt intentional. I stepped back. The pressure returned instantly, behind my eyes, in my ears. That same sensation of being held in focus. I realized then that silence wasn't absence, it was permission. Things maybe, had learned that I could go quiet, that I could disengage. And now it was trying something else. I heard a knock, not loud, not sudden, measured. On the cabin door, every muscle in my body locked. No one should have been out there. No vehicles, no radio contact, no reason. I didn't answer. The knock came again, same rhythm. Then a voice, muffled through the wood. "Ranger? I'm lost." It was wrong immediately. Too calm, too placed, like a line read from memory. I stayed still. "I can see the light inside," the voice continued. "I won't come in. I just need directions." My throat tightened. I hadn't turned a light on. The pressure increased, urging, coaxing. Answer. I moved slowly toward the door, not to open it, but to listen. My hand hovered near the handle. The wood felt warmer than it should have. "I found your trail marker," the voice said. "The one with your handwriting." I backed away. The voice changed slightly then, not angry, curious. "You don't sound like yourself anymore." I didn't respond. The knock stopped. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time felt stretched, elastic. Then something scraped across the door, not forcefully, gently, as if tracing its shape. A sound like fingernails testing a surface. I retreated to the far wall, heart pounding so hard I worried it could hear me. The pressure spiked, then eased. The voice returned, closer now. Not outside, inside. "Staying quiet doesn't mean we can't hear you." I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, the cabin looked rearranged. The furniture was the same, but distances felt off. Corners deeper. Ceiling lower. The room felt like a model someone had adjusted without understanding scale. On the wall opposite me, where there had been nothing before, were marks. Tallies. Fresh. I didn't remember carving them. I didn't remember not carving them. That realization broke something in me. I shouted. Not words, just sound. A refusal. A denial. The pressure exploded. The wall seemed to lean inward. The tallies stretched, lines elongating like shadows at sunset. And then, nothing. The cabin snapped back to normal. The tallies vanished. The door was solid and silent. Morning light crept through the windows, as if nothing had happened. I collapsed to the floor, shaking. I knew then what it was doing. It wasn't haunting the forest. It was collecting behaviors, learning how humans respond when lost, when afraid, when isolated. And it was practicing. The second ranger arrived that evening, a seasoned professional, confident, grounded, the kind of presence that makes a place feel safer just by standing in it. I didn't tell them everything. I told them enough to be careful. We set rules immediately. No unnecessary talking. No radios unless critical. No splitting up. The forest watched. We followed the trail together, daylight fading. The terrain behaved for a while. Then the air thickened. The sense of orientation softened, like the world had lost its edges. The other ranger stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" they asked. I shook my head sharply. "Don't engage," they frowned. It sounded like their name, spoken from somewhere behind us. They turned instinctively. The forest surged, not visually, conceptually, like a decision had been made. The other ranger staggered, disoriented. I grabbed their arm and pulled, hard. "Don't answer!" I shouted. The pressure slammed into us both. The forest reacted violently, ground shifting, trees seeming closer than before. The voice returned, layered now, impatient. "You were easier alone." I dragged the other ranger back, step by step, refusing to let go. They fought me at first, confused, frightened. Then understanding dawned in their eyes. They went silent. The pressure eased. We moved without speaking, without thinking too loudly. Back toward the trailhead, guided by muscle memory and refusal. When we reached open ground, the forest stopped following. We didn't stop moving until we reached the vehicles. That night, we reported everything. Some things never made it into the official record. The search was called off. The area was quietly restricted, marked unsafe due to geological instability. The other ranger transferred within a month. I stayed one more season. I shouldn't have, because the forest still listens. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, I feel that pressure return. Not in the woods, not on duty, but anywhere. Silence lasts too long. Waiting. Learning. I left Yellowstone at the end of that season. On paper, it was routine. End of contract rotation. Nothing unusual. No disciplinary notes. No mental health flags. Clean exit. That was intentional. The park doesn't like stories that imply it learns. I moved south, took a desk-heavy assignment, training support, maps, logistics, briefings, safe work, predictable hours. For a while, it worked. Cities are loud, always humming. Traffic, electricity, voices bleeding through walls. Too much noise for anything like that forest to focus. Or so I thought. The first time I felt it again, I was in my apartment, weeks after leaving. Midnight or later. I don't know exactly. I'd stopped tracking time closely. Old habit. I was sitting in the dark, lights off, just thinking. That's all it took. The pressure returned. Subtle at first. A fullness behind my ears. A sense that the room had leaned slightly toward me. I held my breath, heart pounding. Nothing else happened. I told myself it was trauma. Memory. The mind replaying old fear and familiar patterns. But trauma doesn't wait. This did. Over the following months, I noticed things. Rooms felt smaller when I stayed quiet too long. Hallways felt longer when I walked them without distraction. Phones hesitated before ringing, like they were deciding whether to interrupt. And sometimes, only sometimes, when I was alone and completely silent, I felt that same unmistakable sensation of being recognized, not followed. Recognized. I started leaving noise on, music, television, anything. Even when I slept. Silence became the enemy. Then the dreams started. I wasn't back in the forest. That would have been easier. No, the dreams were worse because they were familiar places. My apartment, grocery stores, empty offices. But rearranged slightly. Angles off. Distances wrong. In the dreams, I would hear a voice speaking to someone else. Always calm. Always patient. Always learning. I woke from those dreams with the certainty that it wasn't dreaming about me anymore. It was checking whether I was still answering. I tried to report it, not officially, casually, to people who might understand, old colleagues, supervisors I trusted. Most smiled politely. A few suggested stress leave. One told me quietly that certain incidents were better left undocumented. Then, one night, I received an email. No sender listed. No subject line. Just a single sentence. You adapted faster than the others. I didn't sleep that night. I changed apartments the next week. Then again 6 months later. New city. New routines. New noise patterns. It didn't matter, because it wasn't tied to a location. It was tied to response. I began to notice patterns in the news. Missing hikers. Disappearances explained away by weather or terrain. Incidents where radios failed in clusters. Where search teams reported confusion they couldn't quite describe. Always places people expected silence. National parks, remote highways, abandoned facilities, offshore platforms, anywhere humans went quiet long enough to be heard. I started writing everything down, not digitally, on paper. Dates, locations, similarities. The more I documented, the clearer it became. This wasn't one thing. It was a process. Something that existed in spaces humans didn't dominate with sound or structure. Something that learned behavior by listening, by observing how we navigated fear, isolation, uncertainty. And Yellowstone? Yellowstone was a classroom. I realized something else too. It never chased me. Not really. It didn't need to. It already had what it wanted from me. Understanding. The final confirmation came 2 years later. I was invited to consult on a search operation. A favor. A unique situation. Different state, different terrain, same problem. A missing person who kept responding to something no one else could hear. During the briefing, someone mentioned radio anomalies, voices without origin, delayed responses. The room grew quiet, too quiet. I felt it immediately, that familiar pressure. The air leaned in. I stood up so fast my chair tipped backward. "Don't stop talking," I said sharply. "Everyone, keep speaking. Doesn't matter what. Just don't let it settle." They stared at me like I'd lost my mind, until the radio on the table clicked. Once, then again. No voice came through, but the pressure intensified, confused, probing. I realized then that it was closer than ever, not geographically, conceptually. It wasn't waiting in forests anymore. It was waiting in gaps, pauses, lulls, empty rooms, quiet moments where humans stopped asserting themselves. I left that job soon after. I don't consult anymore. I don't go places designed to be quiet. I don't sit in the dark. And I never, ever answer when something calls my name from nowhere. Which brings me to why I'm telling you this now. Stories create noise. Attention creates noise. Engagement creates noise. Every comment you leave, every like, every share, every voice acknowledging this story exists. It all matters more than you think. Because whatever learned us out there didn't stop learning. It adapted. And now it listens through us. If you're hearing this alone, in a quiet room, and you feel that subtle pressure building, don't panic. Make noise, speak, move, ground yourself. And most importantly, don't answer anything that already knows your name. If you're still here, like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? Because silence is listening.